Hi, Chris McClune here with Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Welcome to this episode of Moving Water. As always, my two guests are Andy Soccodato and Bill Adkins. We are prepping big time for FDIC. They have a couple of different classes they'll be doing. We've gone over them in the past. If you want to register for those classes, they are at FDIC.com. You can go to the classroom sessions and also the hot sessions and search for their names. It'll come up, and then you can register for them. As usual, we're going to be talking about water today. A little less about water delivery, more about water transporting. Although we could consider that delivery from point A to point B as well. We're going to be talking about tanks. Not the most exciting topic in the world, obviously, but as you're going about specifying your next rig, especially with some of the wait times right now, you want to make sure that you get that tank spec right. You want to make sure it is the size that you want, the configuration that you want. You want to get that right, because once that thing is ordered and set up and built and all plastic welded together, because most of them are polypropylene anymore, just about all of them. So once that's done, there's really no turning back on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, both on the municipal side and on the rural side, because both aspects have different. And I say municipal, I'm talking about urban, suburban, versus the really rural. And because they're all going to have different considerations. We were just talking a little bit before the show started here. It's been interesting to me to watch, because my fire company has gone from 750 gallon tanks when I joined with 1250 GPM pumps. We've stayed the same with the with the tank size, but the pumps now are 2,000 gallon a minute pumps. Just recently, though, we did take delivery of two rigs. We wanted to shorten one up a little bit, and to do that, we had to sacrifice some of that water. So one rig's got 750 gallons, the other rig's got, I want to say 626, but it was a funny number in there. It was a weird number that you wouldn't usually associate with it, but it's well less than that 750. There are many departments that swear by 500 gallons, and we're going to talk a little bit about that 500 gallon size in a bit. But I guess, Bill, and the great part of this is that both of these guests are, both Andy and Bill, are coming at this from a training perspective, from a urban type of setting and a rural setting. Everybody's coming at it from those directions. So we can talk about quite a bit here. Bill, I'm going to start with you this time, and just talk. It's one of these things where I already probably know the answer to the question, but I just want to throw it out there because people might think differently. For you, based on the experience at Loveland, based on Loveland Sims, based on the experience at Fayetteville, is there an ideal tank size that city fleets should be looking for and rural fleets should be looking for? Is there kind of like a sweet spot where you want to at least do this, but you don't necessarily need to go this far? I guess, just speaking from your experience, is there an ideal size?
Well, it all depends on the location and your resources available, in my opinion. For Loveland Sims, we have not only our 4 stations, but we have multiple stations nearby that are there within just a minute or two behind us. So at Loveland, in the urban area, our engines carry 500 gallons, and our ladders, because we're suburban, we have tanks, and our ladders are basically quints. They carry 300 gallons. Now, I will say, with newer designs of apparatus and the tanks, our newest ladder we just received has 500 gallons of water. So without taking up the compartment spaces. In the rural areas, I like to have a little bit larger tank for that, because we're usually waiting multiple minutes before that next apparatus shows up. So at Fayetteville, per se, we have 1,000 gallons a minute, or 1,000 gallon tank. I do know a lot of areas where I train, there's a lot of their first due apparatus, their first due engines carry 2,000 gallons a minute, I keep saying a minute, but 2,000 gallon tanks. So it all depends on the resources that you have coming. How often are you waiting long periods before the next due apparatus shows up? In the urban setting where I deal work at Loveland, we have hydrants every 300 feet, so we don't really need more than that 500 gallons for our engines or 300 for our ladders.
Andy, how about you and your experience? I mean, you're trucking around right now in your '88 Mac, but you know you're seeing all kinds of trucks as you get out and about with different tank sizes and different size pumps, etc. What about from your experience?
Yeah, so the one thing that I've kind of adopted, and after seeing a bunch of stuff and playing with a bunch of different rigs and being in the fire service is, for every advantage there's a disadvantage, right? So the advantage of having more water, that is an advantage. I'm carrying more water on to the fire ground, but there's going to be a disadvantage somewhere, and it's whether or not you can live with whatever that disadvantage is. For some, it may be an increase in your hose bed height. For others, it might be if you are adamant about also having a lower hose bed. Well, now your rig might get longer, right? So for everything, there's a trade off, and what all this is about is finding out what those trade offs are for you. Like Bill was saying, right? In his fire department, it works having 500 gallons of water on their pumpers. When I started in the city of Charlottesville, I came to a fire department that had 500-gallon water tanks on our pumpers, and they had put out fire for years with 500-gallon tanks. And about the time that I came in, we started making a transition to our engine spec, and we found that what we could put out fire with 500 gallons, but if we had any issues, maybe a frozen hydrant or a dead hydrant or anything that caused something to go awry, 500 gallons a minute or 500 gallons of water on board was cutting it close. So they made the decision. Now they're running 750-gallon tanks. So a little bit more water gave them a little bit more of a buffer. And most of the time, at least while I was there, we were putting our fires out without using an entire tank. So you could make the argument that maybe 750 gallons was a little bit of overkill, but it gave us enough of a buffer, right? I've been to some places where in urban areas they're running 1,000-gallon tanks, and they have their reasons for it, and it works for them. So it really does just depend. I wouldn't say that if you're running a 750-gallon tank, you're great, or if you don't have at least that much water, you're screwing up your firefighting operations. It really does depend on the entire picture. And we talk about on the engine company side, hose and nozzle packages, right? The hose and the nozzle has to be a package in order for it to operate effectively. Well, that tank size is a package within the entire pumper itself, right? It is a component on that entire rig, and its size is going to dictate what we can do with our compartments, how high our hose bed is, how long our truck is, right? What it does to our center of gravity if we were going with an L-shaped tank or a square tank or whatever. So there's a lot to go into and think about when you're trying to say, hey, I want this size tank.
Both of you mentioned aspects here that impact operations. Andy, you just mentioned the length of the rig, depending on what you go with that's going to impact maneuverability and things of that nature. You also just mentioned the hose and nozzle package and all that. And those are also very operational, not just a feature on a truck. I wanted to just throw it out there because when you arrive on scene, a lot of this does have to do with that pump operator as well. In terms of 500 gallons, you might be able to stretch 500 gallons into the same amount of time that a 750-gallon tank would give you. And so that's where I wanted to go with this next question. Like you pull up, you got 500 gallons. So we're thinking suburban or urban. You got 500 gallons, fire showing. What are you as the pump operator going to do to maximize the effectiveness of the water you have before you get backed up? And of course, this is where it's operational as well. The nozzleman is going to play a role here. If they just run in there and they just open the thing up and don't not close it, you're not going to have, you're definitely not going to really maximize the effectiveness of that water. Or the length of time that you have it. So Andy, I'll start with you on that one. Fire showing 500-gallon tank. What are you as the pump operator going to do to maximize the effectiveness of that water and the amount of time that you have it?
Yeah, so like Dennis Laguerre says all the time, right? Spec and layout dictate tactics, right? So it's important to recognize if I have a 500-gallon tank. I'll give you the perfect example. The rigs that we were running in Charlottesville when I got hired, we were running 500-gallon tanks, and our inch and three-quarter nozzles were paired with a 200-gallon per minute nozzle. So, if you had that rookie firefighter who was not disciplined with their nozzle movements, I'm giving them a weapon that can flow 200 gallons a minute, and they're being sloppy with it. I'll drain my tank really quickly. Whereas if I look at this and the fire department says, you know what, 500 gallons of water is what we need. We can do a lot with it. But if we pair that with a nozzle that maybe is 150 gallon per minute or 160 gallon per minute, 7/8 tip, right? I can use that water a little bit more efficiently, and I'm not wasting as much, right? Now, we can get into the discussion, right? The fire is going to require the amount of GPM to overcome the BTUs. So if the fire is requiring 500 gallons a minute and I'm only putting 150 gallons a minute on it, then it's not going to go out. It's not going to work. But sometimes, like, our mindset in Charlottesville with our 200 gallon per minute nozzles was we would rather pull and go inside with more water than maybe we need for most of our fires than potentially show up and be outgunned. So it worked for us as long as we were disciplined and we're not just being sloppy with our water. Whereas if I have a company and a department that is disciplined with their water usage and knows when to apply water and where to apply it effectively, right, I may be able to stretch out my 500-gallon tank with my 150-gallon per minute nozzle, right? The other thing to think about from a pump operator standpoint is, and I know this again, it really depends on your resources and your deployment model and everything like that, but I knew that when I was driving rigs in Charlottesville, my frontline rig was a 750-gallon tank, but the reserve was a 500-gallon tank. So I knew if I was in a reserve, I probably need to be a little bit more mindful and aggressive about potentially laying my own supply line because I'm used to having that 750. All right, now I'm 250 gallons less. I really got to make sure that I'm thinking about where my water supply is coming from, or at least communicating that with the second due operator.
I wanted to move over now more toward the rural side of this. And like when I was kind of equating this next question to, I remember back in the day, and it really is actually back in the day now because my youngest is going to be 18 next month. I remember when I was just letting the rest of the line officers know, hey, I'm going to be tied up in about 9 months. My wife is pregnant with our third. And my chief at the time, he goes, well, why would you do that? And I said, what are you talking about? You got 7 kids. He goes, doesn't matter. Once you go over 2, it's all this. It doesn't matter once you go over 2. And so is that the same like with tank size when you're talking, especially in the world of our, like once you hit 1,000, does it matter whether you carry 1,000 or 4,000? I mean, they are selling some 4,000 gallon tankers now. Bill, what do you think there? I mean, is there like it's almost like too. They talk about Arizona. It's heat without humidity. Well, it doesn't really matter to me. Once you hit 100, it's just hot. I don't care whether it's humid or not. I'm dying. You know what I mean? I'm not a hot weather kind of guy. So once you hit that 1,000 gallons, does it even matter whether you carry 1,000 or even more?
Well, in a rural setting, we want to have as much water as possible show up when that first tanker arrives. But we have something that we have to keep in mind, and that's the bridges in our area. How much weight will they carry? In rural communities, bridges are not possibly to the state of the art that they are in the suburban and urban areas. So we have to make sure that the weight of our tankers or tenders meet the standards to go across those bridges. So yeah, I would love to have an 8,000 gallon tanker show up every time, but will our bridges carry that? And the answer here is no, in my areas, anyways. Um, the sweet spot seems to be in our location here is around 3,000 gallons. That puts you 24,000 pounds of water on your rig, and it's a safe. Most of the rigs that's built now, that the chassis are able to handle that 24,000. When you get to the 4,000, that just increases another, 8,000 pounds, and we don't know for sure if your roads, your driveways that you may have to deal with could take that extra weight. So look into your first due areas and your mutual aid companies areas to make sure that those rigs can fit down those roadways.
Andy, what about you? What do you think? Once you hit 1,000, doesn't matter anymore?
Well, I hate to be like this, but it really is a loaded question, right? It depends on a lot of different things. So one of the things that you need to consider if you're going with smaller tank sizes on your tanker tenders, right, and mobile water supply apparatus, depending on the fire flow that I need, I may need more of those apparatus in a shuttle to keep up the same amount of volume that maybe a 2,500 or 3,000 gallon tanker can, provide in a shuttle operation. Bill is 100% correct. Bridge weights and all of that is something that you absolutely have to consider. But the one thing that I learned moving to Tennessee that I got to see pretty quickly firsthand is, the great state of Tennessee. In the east we have a lot of mountains, and in the west we have a lot of flat land. So if you take mobile water supply apparatus from those two different parts of the state, they are set up completely different, because in the east they're much smaller, lighter, single axle, and shorter, so that way they can get up those mountain roads and deal with the Great Smoky Mountains and everything like that. Whereas if you go to West Tennessee, you're seeing tandem axle 3,000, 3,500. I've even seen in Fayette County, Tennessee, a 5,000 gallon tanker on a former military chassis, right? So, that has to play into it as well. But the other thing that's really important to understand is a lot of people will think, well, if I'm showing up with 5,000 gallons or 3,000 gallons or whatever, man, I'm good with that one tanker. Probably not, right? What we need to take into account is how much water is flowing at the fire scene, how quickly is that tanker going to offload, how long is it going to take to go get filled or get to the fill site, how long is it going to take to get back. And when you do that math and do that continuous tanker flow rate calculation, you may find that tanker is really only good for a continuous flow of 150 or 200 gallons a minute, maybe one hand line or less. So that's why, it's really important to pre-plan this kind of stuff, pre-plan your water supplies, pre-plan, the average round trip travel distance for most of our fires is X miles, which means if we want to flow this much water, I need at least 3 2,500 gallon tankers on my box, right? Or we can get away with 3 1,800 gallon tankers. Or, if we go to a bigger tank size, maybe we can get away with 2 3,000 gallon tankers on this, right? So, as much as we hate to admit it, there is some math that can be put into this to kind of help us determine, hey, you know what, we need to think about on our next purchase. Maybe 2,500 gallons is what we need. Maybe it's overkill, or maybe it's not enough.
How much does, in your experience and what you've heard, like we talked a bit about in the beginning about some of the reasons why you go with one size tank over another. Do you guys ever hear, and Andy, I'll start with you on this one. Do you guys ever hear anything about, we went with this because we know that tankers are some of the rigs that get it. I don't know if it's still most of the accidents, but there are still a good percentage of the accidents that we have are tanker apparatus. Do you ever hear that, we went with 1,500 gallons max because we didn't want to go over that because we weren't sure. Like our we hear it all the time. Like our guys are used to driving Hyundais to the station. And they're not heavy equipment operators. Do you hear that as criteria for one size tank over another, Andy?
Absolutely. I'll throw a shout out to Albemarle County, Virginia, where I volunteered while I was up there with the Crozet Fire Department. So in Albemarle County, one of the things that they did years ago that I mean has always stuck with me, and I think is one of the best things that they could have done, is in that county, countywide, they have a standard tanker spec. So every tanker in Albemarle County, at least when I was there, is the same setup. They all have 2,500 gallons of water on board. They all have at least 1,000 gallon per minute pump on board. They're all on matte granite chassis. They all have 1,000 foot of 4-inch on there, right? So really, and they did that for a lot of reasons. Number one, consistency in training, right? So I know that if you can handle Tanker 59 from Crozet, you'll be able to go to Earlysville and handle Tanker 49. Or if we have to train, you're in a reserve tanker or whatever, consistency, everybody knows how to drive it. They all handle the same. They all weigh the same, this, that, and the other. What I like about it from a fireground operational perspective is if I'm the water supply officer on a fire, every time I see a tanker come to my dump site or come to my fill site, I know that's 2,500 gallons, right? 2,500 gallons just entered my dump site, okay? Whereas, some places that I go and teach, this fire company has an 1,800, this fire company has a 3,500, this fire company has a 2,000, and I don't know, I may not know how much water's coming to my dump site if I don't know that specific tanker. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to know exactly how much water is coming and showing up on scene. What I've seen some folks do, especially Maryland's pretty big on this. The Maryland State Firemen's Association's Water Supply Committee, they kind of push this, putting on the side of the tanker on 3 sides of the truck the gallons that are carried, right? So that way, if you're on a large incident, mutual aid companies are coming. I've never seen this tanker before, but it says on the side that's a 3,000 gallon tanker. Oh, okay, I know it's bringing me 3,000 gallons of water to the scene. So yes, there's definitely some advantages to having a set tank size for your locality, for your fire department, for your jurisdiction. But there are also reasons why, maybe this locality or this fire department is a little bit more remote. So carrying an extra 500 gallons or 1,000 gallons on board fits them. Like what I was mentioning before in Fayette County, Tennessee, their county is the same way. All their tankers are 2,000 gallon tankers, with the exception of the one tanker in this one remote area. That's that 5,000 gallon job, right? So that rig is set up because of a special need, but the rest of the fleet is outfitted with 2,000 gallon tanks.
So what about you? Have you had any, even in your own department or anything, where the size of the tank was kind of based on what you considered the ability of your apparatus operators to actually maneuver the rig?
It's not really the tank size, but we have spec'd out trucks with chassis that we know can handle the weight of the 3,000 gallons that we were specking out. If you look at Tanker 85, which is the picture with one behind my back here, the chassis is massive, and a lot of the firefighters are like, I don't like driving it, it's so big. The reason we made it so big was because we knew it could handle the 3,000 gallons, and we didn't want to go cheaper on a chassis that may not be as safe when you go to slow it down, and it's as beefy as we could get without going too large. But a lot of firefighters wish it was a smaller chassis, but they don't realize we did it for the safety of themselves. We wanted to be able to stop, and that's a big part with tanker rollovers and things like that. Is they don't They go to slow down and they don't have the braking power that they think that they have into those curves, and they end up rolling them. A big thing that we started to do here about 5 or 6 years ago is if you are shuttling water, we're in a rural setting, so it's not like we're in traffic all the time. So we tell them not to go lights and siren, to go refill and come back, unless they're sitting in some type of traffic. They can just shut their, when a firefighter is driving lights and siren, they feel like they just got to go as fast as they can. And if we can tell them don't worry about running your lights and siren when you're shoveling water, it calms them down a little bit so that they're not anxious and want to go back and forth quickly. And we found that, not that we, knock on wood, we haven't had any incidents before, but we feel that we noticed that the firefighters are not as anxious when they're driving back and forth to those shuttling sites.
That was I believe that was a viewpoints question I asked Bill Adams and Ricky Riley not too long ago. Was what should tankers operate at emergency speed? Because it really is. I mean, it can. Those are, to me, that's a whole different type of vehicle that you're operating. I mean, I've only operated custom chassis, but I've driven moving vans. Like with oh, actually, no. The one of our chassis on our air truck is a commercial chassis. So, but for the most part, I mean, I've always driven the custom chassis with no more than 750 gallons of water in them. So, to drive something with 3,000, I would like to give it a shot someday, but I don't know. Just to see how it feels. I mean, I these days are probably going to come to an end for me. I've never driven a tandem axle. It looks like our next rescue truck is probably going to be a tandem axle, so that day is going to come to an end. So I'll be learning how to do that a little bit. But I wouldn't mind getting behind the wheel of one of them just once, just to see what it's like. But I can only imagine. It's you're right on it, Bill. Like that adrenaline that you have, it just especially when you get the right officer on the other side who really loves that cue. Man, you're as the operator, you're really you're really getting charged up. So,
You said it correctly there. Firefighters go from driving a Honda Civic, which was 3,000
yeah,
pounds, to a large tanker that has 3,000 gallons. Of just the water alone is 24,000 pounds. So
and that's
it's a totally different beast.
just kind of the way it is. It's just a different. The demographics are just different. At
Mhm.
least on the volunteer side, we don't. We don't have as many like we were saying, heavy or large truck drivers, volunteering, the guys that are used to handling those types of things. So little, that we could have a whole other discussion. Maybe I should talk to Ricky about this one of these days on Talking Trucks, just about the whole CDL thing. Pennsylvania. I mean, I don't need to have one. My son has one for the tree company he works for, but I do not have one for driving around, this truck that's 30 feet long and carrying X amount of gallons of water. So I mean that well, now my wheels are turning for the next Talking Trucks. Now, thanks, guys. This was good. This was good for me. But before we've touched on a lot of different things. I've had other questions that I think we've already answered. About those reasons why you go with one or the other. Bill, you were talking about your sweet spot for the size of the tank. Actually, Andy, we didn't ask you what over your years has there been a sweet spot for either the rural side or the urban side for tank size that you've come up with and said, if you're going to do it,
I I personally, and this is just my opinion based on the places that I've worked and volunteered and everything. I really like a 750 tank. I feel very confident when I have 750 gallons of water. I feel that from a rig design standpoint, I'm not sacrificing too much on the body with regards to height or length or hosebed height or hosebed depth. So I like that. It doesn't add. I'm not too much heavier compared to the 500-gallon tank. And yeah, 1,000 gallons would be great on every fire, but I know I don't need it on every fire, and I definitely don't need my hose bed to be up in the air all the time, right? So the 750 tank has been my sweet spot in my experience.
Bill, for
To
those,
add to that,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
Chris,
Bill.
you talked about the hose bed being so high. Because we have the 1,000-gallon tanks on our engines, uh, we use webbing on our 5-inch to bring that down. We don't want our firefighters to have to get up onto the hose bed to try to get that hose off the bed. We do have a high bed on our apparatus, and because of that, we've put a webbing with cinched onto that so that the firefighter can be able to stand on the ground with gear on and pull that hose down there to them so that they can make their deployment.
Well, you guys both said it a couple different times during this. I mean, there are going to be trade-offs no matter what. You take from here, you're going to have to you give to here, you got to take a little bit from here. Sometimes it's compartment space, sometimes it's hose bed height, sometimes it's the length of the rig. There are going to be those trade-offs no matter what. Even if you're not grappling over the tank size, it could be something completely different. It could be pump panel size. It could be number of discharges, and that makes the pump panel a little bigger. You got to get that back from somewhere if you want to have, one of these more nimble rigs. But Bill, for those who might be grappling with how much water to carry, and I guess that's really where it all begins. But for those grappling with how much water to carry, do you have any advice for them to kind of guide them a little bit into how to make that decision?
Yeah, my advice to them is to form a committee, go to your mutual aid companies and include them with it, knowing what type of apparatus that they have. Get some advice from them. Doesn't mean you have to go with what they say verbatim, but they may be able to look from the outside, looking at your department and see what you may actually need. Include your firefighters that may be thinking outside the box of something that you may overlooked. So and get that committee, that some knowledgeable people that are like, it's not just the chief. We want to open that up and get those ideas. So, and it all depends. Andy and I have both said it multiple times today. It all depends, right? So it depends on your.
Yeah, I mean, Bill really hit the nail on the head there. The one thing that I do like to talk about, and it's related to the tank, but it's more of a plumbing side note. We talked a little bit before about those areas that have a lot of hills, positioning in weird spots. One of the things that I've come across that I'm a pretty big advocate for in those areas is specifying on your tank that you want a front and a rear sump. And that'll probably result, depending on how your truck manufacturer does it, it may result in 2 tank to pump valves. But the advantage of that is if you are facing uphill, you can get all the water out of your tank. Or if you're facing downhill, same thing, right? So specifying that if you're in a hilly area can be really beneficial. The other potential advantage of that is, the NFPA 1900 standard says that the tank to pump plumbing only has to be able to flow 500 gallons a minute from the tank to the pump. So if you want, for whatever reason, to be able to flow more than 500 gallons a minute from your tank to your pump for whatever reason, right? It could potentially be very important for tankers. Having front and rear sumps allows you essentially to have 2 tank to pump valves, and now you can get that higher tank to pump flow rate. And you have the added benefit of being able to get all the water out of your tank, regardless of where you're positioned.
Well, we've hit on it. We haven't solved all the world's problems today, but I think that we've tackled I mean, this is something. Whenever you get into speccing a truck, I mean, a pumper or a tanker, the tank size is going to become sometimes a pretty substantial decision to make based on the other things that you want the truck to do, based on based on the size of your station. Like you were saying, Bill, the bridges and such. It really does sort of dictate a lot of the other stuff on the rig. a year last year, it was just last year, it was 2025. Mike Wilbur wrote an article for me about the domino effect when you pick one thing. And that was the one example that we used was just, it might not cost a lot to go from that 750 to $1,000 tank, but what does that do to the rest of the vehicle when you do that? What are the other dominoes there? Does it change your suspension? Does it change the crew cab size? Does it change other things? It's certainly going to change probably the handling of the vehicle. So it's something that and there are just so many different applications that it's hard. We tried to nail down some things here, but it's impossible to. And really, just putting together that committee to really start with you've said it a million times, Andy, what is the mission of the vehicle?
Right.
That's really going to be kind of your guiding light. If there are topics that we haven't hit on here on Moving Water yet that you'd like to see us talk about, let me know. I'm at chris.mcclune@clarionevents.com. And Bill just had a webinar. We just did it yesterday, I think. Yes, it was just yesterday we did it. And Andy's got one coming up. So go to www.fireapparatus.com/webinars to see those. Bill's will be here. So, obviously everyone's coming back multiple times to listen to previous episodes of Moving Water. So, year over year, but both of those webinars will be available for a year once they're complete. Andy's is going to be next month. It's on March 12th. I say next month. I mean, next month is Sunday. We're recording this on a Friday, the last Friday of February. So in March, it will be March 12th is our next one there. So please be sure to view that. If you do want to see any of we talked about the webinars. All of our podcasts are archived at www.fireapparatus.com/podcasts. Moving Water, Talking Trucks. TikTok, that was a series that we did in 2025 on thermal imaging. So make sure you check that out as well. Other than that, thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time as always. Best of luck. Well, this is going to air in March, so best of luck next month at FDIC with your classes. Maybe we'll see you on FDIC Live this year. That list is being compiled now as we speak. So we're live at FDIC. So again, this has been Chris McClune along with Bill Adkins and Andy Soccodato. Have a good one, everybody, and stay safe. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.